Tonight, I get to meet one of my heroes. This is the 2022 Porsche 911 GT3. We have a 4-liter flat 6 that revs to 9,000 RPM, 502 horsepower, 346 pound-feet of torque, and boy, does that feel like an underrated number. This thing absolutely rips. It is driving nirvana. The GT3 starts at around $164,000. This one's spec'd up to $177,000. And yeah, let's walk you around this. We'll show you what it looks like inside and out, and then we'll take it for a drive and give you guys some thoughts on what it's been like to live with this week. So there are a number of major enhancements and improvements for the 992 GT3. The biggest one is the double wishbone front suspension. This is the first time that this suspension has been incorporated into a Porsche road car. It's been used in race cars for a while, and the race drive suspension doesn't end there. We have 100% ball joint connections all over the chassis, adjustable front and rear wings. You can see this little torque spit right here. You can tweak that, adjust it in a number of different settings for maximum downforce. This also has an adjustable front splitter. I absolutely love the front end of this new GT3. Jury's still a little bit out on how the rear end looks. I'm not a big fan of the red surround on the red wheel lip. 20s in the front, 21s in the rear, 255s and 315s. This GT3 is equipped with the steel brakes and center lock wheels. We also have the Goodyear Eagle F1 Super Sport R tires. It's also impressively light, about 3,126 pounds in manual form, and that's only about 11 pounds heavier than the 991.2 GT3, which is pretty impressive. This is lighter than the GR Corolla that we just drove by 100 pounds, by over 100 pounds. Inside, you'll find a pretty straightforward driver-focused interior. The highlight of which for me is the 6-speed manual transmission. Really nice throws, short gates, very positive engagement. This is one of the best shifters in the business. We have pretty simplified climate controls right here, very straightforward. A few quick access buttons for our nose lift, race mode for the dampers, hazard button, ESC and ESC traction control off. Infotainment is pretty much standard Porsche. We have wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. We do have digital gauges on both sides of this analog tachometer, which revs to 9,000 RPM. I have it set to change in Sport and Sport Plus modes. We get this track-focused gauge cluster where you can see your engine and oil temp, oil pressure, tire pressure, lots of simplified gauges, and your speed is right in the center. Heated seats, cup holder, electric parking brake, little center console area, nice place to put your phone and plug it in via USB. Here's our glove box, another cup holder, probably the only one I'd trust myself to use. And of course we have just the standard sport bucket seats. No rear seats in the GT3 as per previous models. Let's show you a couple more details on the outside and then we'll take this for a drive. Might as well give you a view of the front. A lot of carbon composite materials in this GT3. You can see some of that represented right here in the front trunk. A lot of weight savings. A lot of little tiny grams and pounds and ounces shaved all over the place on this new GT3. Completely flat bottom of the car for aerodynamics. Can't really see the engine in these anymore. Popping the rear door just opens this piece, which is an access port for coolant and oil, and that's it. That's all you get. Here's the fuel filler cap, 93 octane minimum. I think I'd change a couple things with my spec, or my ideal spec of GT3, but this is pretty darn close. Not a ton of options, no carbon ceramics. Yeah, this is about how I would have it. I love all of the Alcantara suede trimming in this GT3, or as Porsche likes to call it, their Sport Tex interior. It's supposed to be a little bit more durable and robust. Here's what our reverse camera looks like. Pretty good visibility all throughout. Boy, this clutch is a whole lot lighter than I remember from the 997.2 GT3 I drove once. A pretty easy car to drive, honestly. Revs drop quickly. And just listen to that flat six. So, we'll start off in normal mode. This does not have rev matching engaged. You can change settings for sport and track modes. You can disable start-stop, turn the exhaust system into sport, turn off auto blip, turn off ESC, enable the track view, a lot of different settings. In track mode, I have auto blip engaged. In sport mode, I do not. I've actually really enjoyed driving this GT3, doing all my rev matching myself this week. I also have it set so that my suspension settings in all modes are set to sport instead of track. I feel like on the streets here in Michigan, track mode is a little bit of an overkill. It gets a little bit too stiff for my taste, but sport mode is a pretty nicely balanced suspension setting. It's not too rough, it's definitely on the stiffer side, but you could daily this, no problem. There's two settings, sport and track. Fantastic brake pedal feel in this GT3. A little bit less bite from these steel brakes than I was expecting, but it really lets you get into the pedal and put a lot of pressure on that. It feels like a block of wood. It's fantastic. Just how a brake pedal should feel. There is a ton of adjustability in this new GT3 for track work. It has adjustable sway bars, adjustable ride height for corner balancing. You can change front toe in, camber. All right, let's go into sport mode here. Symphony of sound. That is absolutely amazing. Sitting here on the highway, 75 miles an hour, just over 3,000 RPM. Not ideal for fuel economy. This is rated for about 16 miles to the gallon combined. 14 in the city, 18 on the highway. It is quite comfortable though. These seats feel pretty good to my 5'10" frame. Not a ton of wind or road noise, a little bit of noise from the high performance tires, and of course you can hear that exhaust. But all things considered, this is a pretty livable GT3. Of course there are more comfortable versions of the 911, but I've got to say this isn't that much of a compromise given the performance and factory built race car nature of this car. Interesting note, if you start to roll back at a stoplight, the reverse camera will kick on. Even if you're in first gear, clutch in. See what this front end can do. never driven a car with a front end that has this much traction. It's absolutely insane. You can really adjust the position of this car mid-corner with your throttle. On throttle, it starts to push. Let off, it starts to tart in. If you let off fully, you can have as much rotation as you want. This new GT3 has a wider front track, and combine that with a double wishbone front suspension and just some Porsche magic. The handling here is sublime. It's actually incredibly approachable. I've just been in awe this week driving this car around. It's very good, very refined. When I first got behind the wheel, I felt like it was missing a little bit of something, a little bit more character than what the previous GT3s have doled out. But I don't know, after spending a few more days with it, I have really become smitten with this thing. It's just about perfect. Had a couple hiccups earlier today with the rev matching system. Let's try that out in track mode and see how it performs right now. Completely speechless. I think this is the car. This is the dream. This is a case where I get to meet my hero, and it's just as good as I thought it was. I spent a little bit of time in a 991.2 last year, thanks to Platinum Motor Cars, but it was a quick drive. Most of it was spent in bumper-to-bumper traffic. I feel like some of the engagement points, your shifter, the steering was a little bit sharper, a little bit more tactile in the previous gen GT3, and this has been refined a little bit. But overall, it still gives you the fizz. It still feels, sounds, and does all the GT3 things. And the performance, the handling, the suspension, it's all bumped up a notch. I'm not really sure why Porsche didn't incorporate double wishbone suspension earlier into their GT models. This also has rear axle steering, which is pretty incredible on this. But it makes for a car that you can just place just about anywhere you want. This car will do anything you want it to around a corner. Tons of traction, powering out. Turn in, mid-corner character is super adjustable and neutral. And the power. It's deceivingly fast. You look at some of the numbers on the spec sheet, and they don't come close to how this car feels. You can go drive an 800 horsepower Hellcat, and it won't feel nearly as fast as the GT3 with 500 horsepower. I really appreciate that Porsche put an emphasis on keeping weight down in this new GT3, even though it's a much larger car than previous generations, even the 991. It really does enhance the whole driving experience, and I've got to say, I am not disappointed with this thing this week. It's pretty amazing. I've heard some reviews mention that it's a little bit on the stiff side. I would wonder if people were just driving the car in track mode the whole time. In track mode, it is a little bit too stiff for the street. It actually has a little bit more understeer too. But you can set track mode, you can set sport mode, to sport suspension settings, and I think it's a pretty livable mode. I haven't had many complaints this week on our rough Michigan roads. In my mind, this is about as livable of a GT3 as there has ever been. You really have to adapt to how high this thing revs. If you shift just by your hearing, 6,000 RPM sounds about like a red line, at least to my ear. But you still have another 3,000 RPM to go. Bit of an unfortunate rattle on the passenger side this week. Kind of my only complaint about this GT3. You also get the nose lift system, raises the front end by about an inch. Pretty useful. You can also set that to correspond with GPS coordinates, so you can save a location with that front end lift, which is super useful. Corvette has a similar system. With how low that front splitter is, it's probably something that I would spec in my GT3. Let's go back into normal mode. We'll take a look at our traditional gauge cluster here. And the exhaust gets a little bit quieter in this mode too, for how I've set things up in this car. Not by much, but it's definitely a little bit more of a toned down sound. This week I have found this to be just a wonderfully fluid and connected driving experience. There are not a lot of cars that I drive anymore where you really truly feel connected to the machine. And I've got to say, this GT3 just, it's a mechanical symphony. It's absolutely amazing to experience. There's so much performance. It's so exciting. It's fun to drive pretty much all the time, whether you're just putzing around in traffic or revving it out to 9,000 RPM. It revs so high that you can really only enjoy first gear and maybe a little bit of second at legal speeds. So you do have to watch out. That rear wing impedes your rearward visibility just a bit. You've got to have your wits about you in this GT3. Play around in track mode with auto rev matching here a bit. That rear wheel steer really shrinks the perceived size of this GT3. It feels so light and nimble. sounding cars I've ever driven at any price. There's a few V10s out there that make some pretty special sounds, but something about this flat six is just incredible. This engine's derived from the GT3 Cup car, modified and enhanced from the Porsche Speedster. A little bit tamer than I was expecting, honestly, just driving it around normally. I thought it was going to be a little bit harsher, a little bit less comfortable, a little bit less livable. I have CarPlay. I haven't even turned on the stereo yet. I have no idea what the sound system is like. Don't really know if I care to. I don't really care. It's very happy doing what it says is about 90 miles an hour. 6th gear, about 3,600 RPM. A little bit of maintenance throttle. One of the most sublime cars I think I've ever driven. The 911 has always been a favorite for me ever since I got some time behind the wheel of a Carrera S back in 2013, 2012. And that was a 7-speed PDK. This also has a 7-speed PDK available. The manual is a no-cost option, which is fantastic. Probably the way to go, though the PDK is a phenomenal transmission. I don't like how they've disguised it to look like a manual, though. What a great drive. Every time this car leaves your driveway, it's an event, it's an experience. It's so approachable and so willing to be driven. Somehow it manages to be both easy and approachable, but also a bit on a knife edge. And a bit scary sometimes too. Porsche hasn't gotten rid of all the rear engine character of the GT3. They've just kept improving and improving upon that front end. This still feels definitively rear engine, especially when you approach the limit. But, oh gosh, that limit is just so much higher. Pretty wicked rev limiter there too. Like I said, you have to keep your wits about you. You've got to be awake driving this car. And if you're not, it will wake you up. Any complaints? Well, I'm not the biggest fan of this infotainment. and asks me about 4 questions before I can get to my main screen. There's no physical adjustment for the gauge brightness display. I don't know why manufacturers are on a war against the dimmer switch, but you have to go through about 4 different menus to get to that in this. That's about all I can come up with as far as complaints go. Could use a little bit more bite initially from these steel brakes, but they're very easy to modulate, very progressive. If you need braking force out of them, you have to get deep into that pedal and put some pressure into it. And actually, I think on track, they'd be pretty perfect. GT3, guys, one of the greats. One of the best cars, if not the best car I've driven in a long, long time. Is it overly refined? Maybe upon first impressions, but I think after living with it, it's so, so nice to experience all the time. I would daily one of these. And I don't think it's said enough. You really do have to appreciate the lengths at which Porsche has gone to make this car so track capable and so adjustable on the racetrack. There's so much adjustability with the suspension, with the alignment, with the aerodynamics on this GT3. You can set it up to be such a more aggressive car than how it comes from the factory, and I really do hope we get a chance to take this out on track someday. We did contact Porsche, try to get some time out in this week, but we needed to get in touch with them a little bit earlier. So we'll just do our due diligence next time we have a track day, and yeah, we'll have to get this thing out on track, either in PDK or manual form. I talked to Jack from Savage Geese the other day, and he said this is the best track car he has ever driven. You can't really give much higher praise than that. I'm here to tell you, on the street, I'm far from disappointed. Oh, I have one more complaint. I do miss the Porsche key. This just has a fixed switch that turns on the ignition. It would be nice to get that red Porsche key and slip it in again. And there's no proximity unlock with this GT3. You have to reach in your pocket, get the key out, press the unlock button. It's the same key that you get in all of the other Porsches. But, again, grasping at straws here. This is just about perfection in my book. There is quite a bit of wind buffeting above 80, 90 miles per hour. So if you are on track with your GT3 and you've got the windows down, that's quickly going to be an annoyance. I'm not sure if there's an aftermarket fix for that. Usually, I know with the Toyota Supra, there's a little bit of a lip that you put right here on the windshield, and that gets rid of the buffeting. There might be something similar that you can get for the GT3. Cruise control's pretty easy to operate. It's just standard Porsche cruise control. Press forward to increase your speed, pull back to decrease, up to resume, down to cancel. No adaptive system, no lane keep assist. You don't need any of that nonsense. This car is about driving. I do forget whether I'm in auto blip mode or not. Just wow. What a sound, what a car. Like I said at the beginning of this video, driving nirvana. Wrap things up from where we started. That's a video on the 911 GT3, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned on the Winding Road and Daily Motor YouTube channels for more videos on this car, and crossing my fingers, hoping that we can get this out on track someday. What a machine. Okay, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.